What's going on, folks? Ted from Immersion here, and we're back with our Critical Role Call of the Netherdeep coverage. For those of you asking about other stuff that I've planned on covering that's in the past that I haven't gotten a chance to get to, that's coming. There's only 2 videos left in this series, and then it's done. The video that you're going to see today, which is all about the rivals. Now, I was originally going to make this one large video covering all of the monsters, including and the NPCs, but the rivals have enough of a unique thing that I think they deserve their own video. So there'll be the rivals, then the creatures, which is a small amount of creatures, and some of them are reprints, so we'll skip over those. And then we're going to jump back and finish up Fizzbands, Strixhaven, go back to the Dark Souls stuff that I have as well, a lot of stuff. So again, just bear with me. This will be a quick hit 2 video thing, and honestly, from a creative standpoint, these ones are quick hits, and that's what I want to do, and it doesn't make me feel burned out, so that's what I'm going to do. 92.8K, we're getting up there, almost at 93. I have a bunch of stuff, too, and I keep getting things, so I might want to do some giveaways, so maybe 95K we'll do a giveaway, and then obviously something extravagant for 100K. So let's jump over to D&D Beyond, and again, there's links in the description if you'd like to go pick up a copy of Critical Role Call of the Netherdeep. It's an Amazon affiliate link, so if you pick it up there, it helps out the channel. But there's some language and stuff here we haven't seen because these rival characters are essentially NPC, or they easily could have been PCs, but there's some language here that I wanted to show you. So, has a little bit about using a stat block, unusual attacks, and magic. It says some creatures have weapons that deal unusual damage types, and spellcasting that functions in atypical ways. Such an exception is a special feature of that stat block and represents how the creature uses the weapon or casts its spells. The exception has no effect on how a weapon or spell functions for another creature. Okay, and then it says meeting magic item prerequisites. Again, this is that new language. If a stat block contains the name of a class in parentheses under the creature's name, the creature is considered a member of that class for the purpose of meeting prerequisites for magic items. Right, normally if you see an NPC like a veteran NPC or a noble or a priest NPC, they're just that. But these characters might say paladin in parentheses, therefore that character, that NPC, is considered a paladin for the purposes of anything you might want to give to them. So we have our 5 adventuring rivals. We covered them in an earlier video, but I'll give you the names again. I don't have the pronunciation guide here in front of me, but we have, I think it's Ao Jabe is the Water Genasi, who's kind of the leader of the group. We have Dermot Werder, who's the Goblin Priest. I think it's Galsariad Ardith, the Drow Mage. Irvine Wastewalker, who's the human, who has some funky backstory stuff. And then Maggie Keen Eyes, who is an ogre fighter. All right, so as I said, the thing that's unique about this, and something that I actually very much enjoy, is this concept of the rivals are sort of there to constantly needle the party and sort of, you know, be their rivals, to compete against them for quests and things of that nature. And as your party continues to grow in strength, as D&D characters tend to do, the rivals do as well. And we can see that right here on the left, 3 tiers, right? Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3, as the rivals grow in strength. And then we might even get to see things like what subclasses the rivals choose and so on. So it says the rivals battle chatter. The battle chatter table gives examples of things the rivals might say in combat, which I also very much like, right? Either to coach each other or the other characters. These lines of dialogue fit their bright-eyed look early in the adventure. You can make up new lines as they grow and change. So if we go down the list, you see Ao. Okay, team, they're off balance. Rally. Have you had enough? Yeah, just give up. You're finished. I would also, you can obviously make up whatever voices and things you want, right? Or Dermot happens to be a goblin, whatever goblin voice you have, right? I'm here to make sure no one dies. Back off. The Luxon will protect me. And you can see here, right? Maggie, that's quite a blunder. You're lucky I'm feeling merciful. Fight smarter and harder. They have little combat jeers, and I kind of like that. This is also, in my head, feels very video game-y or very anime-y, where people would do this kind of stuff, because normally I feel like when you are fighting NPCs in combat, like, not 100% of the time, but the NPCs usually don't have kind of scripted, like, little jeers and things they can throw out there, and this is kind of something new, at least in my perspective, and I really like it. So let's move on to our Tier 1 rivals. Now, we've got a little image of all of the characters here, the ones we've mentioned, right? So, the Tier 1 rivals are fledgling adventurers who've gained a modicum of power through their individual exploits before the beginning of the story. They are seeking to write a grand tale of their own. So let's go scroll down and see. So we have AO first here, and you can see here Ranger, so she is considered a Ranger. Therefore, anything that's specific to a Ranger she'll have access to, and you can see also Water Genasi. So again, I don't feel the need to necessarily run through the entirety of the stat block here. You can see, her statistics across the board, pretty decent, right? She's got studded leather armor. She's a Genasi, right? So she has, and it's interesting because they didn't give them all of the stuff, right? Because we know Water Genasi got updates, right? She has resistance to acid damage. She can breathe water and air. But we know that they got updates in the form of Mordenkainen's Tome, or Mordenkainen's Monsters of the Multiverse, but we actually don't see her innate Genasi spellcasting listed here. She has a Harpoon, which Harpoon is not, I don't think, technically a weapon type that exists, but interestingly enough, this one does 2d8 piercing damage. Now, that might be a function of her being a Ranger, and they kind of baked into the stat block maybe the Hunter Ranger ability to do extra damage to people that are already damaged. I'm not sure. But it doesn't do anything specific. It's essentially just a melee weapon. She also has a longbow, and then a couple of spell casting. She can cast once a day each, Animal Friendship and Goodberry. Dermot here, we can see he's a cleric. I also think it's interesting that they did keep a goblin and goblinoid. This is something that I brought up in my early kind of leak coverage of Monsters of the Multiverse. There are things that specifically say that certain races are considered goblinoid for the purposes of things that function against a goblin or goblinoid creatures. The biggest example a lot of you brought up to me was Favored Enemy does specifically state goblinoid. But I'm wondering if there will be more things in the future that are maybe new racial features, which would be really cool. So he is a cleric. He does have a breastplate and a shield. We can see he can make a Warhammer attack and a Searing Wrath attack. Now, what's interesting, again, is Searing Wrath is a new ability we've never seen, but this is not technically considered a spell. This falls into that sort of updated thing that we see from Monsters of the Multiverse, where monsters have certain abilities in their stat block that essentially function like a spell, but are not quantified as one, therefore do not function with counterspell. So Searing Wrath is a ranged attack, range of 60 feet, 2d8 radiant damage, and the target is blinded until the end of their next turn. No saving throw on that blind attack, which is pretty interesting. Again, I'll also say, like I said, steal, from anything you want. This could be an awesome thing, an ability, a limited use ability to give to a party member. Perhaps this comes in the form of a magic item, a boon, giving somebody else in the party, whether in this campaign or elsewhere, the Searing Wrath ability. And then he also has some spellcasting guidance, Light, Spare the Dying, and Bless and Cure Wounds. Then we have, I think it's Galsariad. Again, this is a Drow wizard here. We have Fey Ancestry, although it is still listed as the original Fey Ancestry here, not the updated one versus with Trance giving the immunity to magical sleep. We have Drained Potential as an action, a melee or ranged spell attack, something, again, we've seen things being updated that can be an ability that can be used ranged or melee. 5 foot or 30 foot, does 3d10 necrotic damage, and he gains 5 temporary hit points. That is pretty interesting. As well as Gravity Wave, causes a rippling wave of magical gravity to fill a 10-foot radius sphere on a point he can see within 120 feet. Each creature in that area must make a DC 13 strength save. On a fail, they take 5d6 force damage and are pulled towards the sphere. I believe this is kind of the Graviturgy Wizard ability here. And we can see some also spellcasting Mage Armor, Mage Hand at will, and Long Strider once per day. And then Distort Gravity as a bonus action. It targets him, this is once per day, this bonus action. Targets himself or one willing creature that he can see within 60 feet of himself, magically distorting the gravity. Any creature within that 5 feet takes a d6 force damage, and the target can use a reaction to float upward up to 20 feet without provoking attacks of opportunity. When this effect ends at the start of his next turn, they gently float down. So his main form of attack is this Drain Potential, which is pretty nuts because it can be both melee or ranged, and it provides temporary hit points. Then we have Irvine Wastewalker, who is just a human, has no special abilities as far as we can see here, and that is tied a little bit to the backstory. We can see Fortitude recharges on a short or long rest. If damage reduces him to 0 hit points, he can make a con save with a DC equal to 5 plus the damage taken, and he goes to 1 hit point instead. So almost like a Barbarian's not relentless endurance, but persistent rage or whatever it's called. And then he can make a dagger attack when the dagger does a little bit of poison. And lastly, we have Maggie Keen Eyes, who is an ogre. Doesn't really have too much in the way of class abilities here, but Maggie and allies within 30 feet have advantage on initiative rolls as long as she isn't incapacitated. And then she has her giant Maul attack, which does 2d8 plus 4 bludgeoning damage, which has a range of 10 feet. And she can force the creature that she hits to make a strength save or be pushed 5 feet away and also knocked prone. And then she also has a hammer toss, which does 2d4 plus 4 bludgeoning and has the same abilities. Now we move on to the Tier 2 rivals, right? So it says, learning that their adventures take them into horrific places that will test their mettle, but they face these challenges with heads held high. So now they have jumped up from basically challenge rating 3 to challenge rating 5 into the Tier 2 ability here. So if we look at AO again here, she's got all the stuff she had previously, but she has some additional spell casting. Now she also has Pass Without a Trace, which she did not have, and it looks like her dexterity has increased as well. And now has access to a bonus action ability called Reposition. She orders one ally she can see within 30 feet of herself. If they can see and hear her, they can spend their reaction to move up to their speed, and it doesn't provoke attacks of opportunity. Dermot here has increased his armor to Splint Mail. I think I see a strength and possibly also a wisdom increase. Still the same attacks, looks to be the same, although Searing Wrath now does 48 radiant damage. And we can see he can now cast Bless at 2nd level as well as Cure Wounds at 3rd, and then also has access to Revivify. Galsariad has, again, moved up as well. We see Drain Potential now, I think does, still looks to be the same. I think it does 4d10 now as opposed to 3d10. Gravity Wave looks like the damage here is increased to 10d6. We now also have Scrying as an action and the Slow ability, and I think this has increased the Distort Gravity as well to 2d6, and I believe some of the spell save DCs have also bumped up. Irvine, interestingly enough, has not really changed too much. A little bit of more hit points, and a little bit more poison damage on the dagger attack, but I thought maybe we'd see them take class levels as they leveled up. You know, ability scores have improved as well. Nothing too crazy. And then Maggie here, Maggie Keen Eyes, now has this push ability, also is now immune to Frightened. Once during each of her turns, after hitting a creature with an attack, she can force the target to make a strength saving throw. On a failed save, they're pushed up to 10 feet horizontally and knocked prone. So she can just do that once a turn, and that's been added as opposed to being part of the attacks. That's now its own separate ability. It looks like the damage remains pretty much the same on her attacks, but she can now make 2 Giant Maul or Hammer Toss, and she also has Rally. When one target she can see within 30 feet of herself bolsters them with words of encouragement, they gain 15 hit points if they can see or hear her. And something I was hoping we would see as we scroll down, and we do, we see them sort of with updated armor. So we saw them kind of at the start, if we jump back up to the Tier 1 block, where they're sort of here, like, they all look kind of, I guess I call them green, right? Like new adventurers, everybody seems like smiling and happy. And now they are significantly, looks like more beaten down. You can see some scars, some adjustments to the armor and the looks that they have. Their journey has forced the Tier 3 rivals to make decisions, sometimes out of grim necessity, that they might not have made earlier. All 5 of them suffer from Ruidium corruption. When the characters encounter them, assume that the rivals have removed all levels of exhaustion from themselves through Rest of Magic, but the effects of the Ruidium corruption remain. And you can kind of see that here on the weapons and the staff, the armor, all of the sort of Ruidium veins going through that. So, if instead you want to weaken the rivals to make them less of a physical threat or reinforce the danger of Ruidium corruption, you can give one or more of the rivals a d4 levels of exhaustion. In this case, you need to keep track of each rival's exhaustion level and conditions corresponding and the corresponding effects. To facilitate their efforts, Galsariad has learned the water-breathing spell. Additionally, all the rivals have acquired Ruidium equipment to protect them from the effects of underwater pressure. Irvine's prosthetic arm. During a misadventure that unfolded while the rivals were apart from their characters, Irvine and Wastewalker lost an arm and gained an arcane prosthetic. This item functions for no one else. You can kind of see the arcane prosthetic right here. Alright, so here's AO in her Tier 3 version here. She's now also immune to the Frightened condition. She has the special equipment, as you can see here, wields a Ruidium harpoon. If AO rolls a 1 on the attack roll made with the harpoon, she must succeed on a DC 20 Charisma save or gain a level of exhaustion. She can now also make 3 attacks with her Ruidium Harpoon or the Longbow. The Ruidium Harpoon also does an extra 2d6 psychic damage, and it looks like she has increased her dexterity up to 20 at this point. Her spellcasting has also increased. We now have freedom of movement excuse me, and protection from energy. Still has Reposition as a bonus action. Dermot here has also increased to now wearing plate mail. He also has Mariner's armor, so he has no issues with swimming in his armor as well. And he wears the Ruidium Warhammer. Same kind of thing. If he rolls a 1, he needs to make a Charisma save. He can now make one, still same number of attacks, but his Ruidium Warhammer does 2d6 additional psychic damage. His Searing Wrath does 5d8 damage. His spell save DCs have gone up to 16. He can now bless at 3rd level, and then again, still looks like he has Revivify once a day. Galsariad here, we now have a couple new abilities. We see a Ring of Swimming has been added in here. We have Deflection as an ability. He warps gravity around himself to magically deflect incoming attacks. While he's wearing no armor and not incapacitated, his AC includes his Intelligence modifier, which is how it's now currently a 17. He does have, again, the Ring of Swimming and a Ruidium Dagger, which has the same issues with if you roll a natural 1. He can make 1 Drain Potential attack and 1 Ruidium Dagger attack. Drain Potential seems to pretty much be the same, although the distance range has gone up to 120 feet, and it's 10 temporary hit points gained back. We have the Ruidium Dagger, which again functions like a normal dagger, just with additional psychic damage. The Gravity Rend is now a DC 16 strength save and 12d6 damage, and they're restrained for a minute. I don't recall the restraint being there before. I could be wrong. And then the spell save DC is a 16. We have also now added, I think, slow telekinesis and water breathing. Distort Gravity has also increased up to 46, and I'm not sure the range may have adjusted as well. Irvine Wastewalker still does not have class levels, but let's see what else we've got here. Still has the same Fortitude ability, is now wearing Gloves of Swimming and Climbing, and has a Ruidium Short Sword. And then we talked about how he does also have the prosthetic arm, which doesn't seem to really function much different than he has an arm that functions like a prosthetic, but it functions normally. He can make 1 dagger attack and 2 Iridium short sword attacks. His dagger has increased in the amount of poison damage he can do, as well as his dexterity, so the overall modifier damage has increased. And he has this short sword now, which does psychic damage, as Ruidium things tend to do. And then lastly, we have Maggie Keen Eyes here, who now was wearing Ruidium plate mail, has an armor AC of 18, is now immune to the Charmed and Frightened condition, and has resistance to psychic damage from the Ruidium armor that she wears. She still has her push ability, which is now a DC 16 and pushes people 15 feet away. Again, if she fails a saving throw, because she's wearing armor and not a weapon, makes her 1 on a saving throw. She'll have to make the roll for exhaustion. She now makes 2 heavy Great Axe or Hammer Toss attacks. The Great Axe has obviously increased in the damage to 2d12 as opposed to the 2d8 she was doing before, and her Hammer Toss now does 44 damage. And then again, she still has her Rally. However, the Rally ability now gives 30 temporary hit points. And then after that, we roll into the monsters. So that is sort of the new rivals that exist here in Critical Role Call of the Netherdeep. As I said, I think this is pretty cool. I like the concept of this sort of adventuring group, and you may have introduced this. I've done this in the past where the party does have sort of, there are other groups of adventurers that exist in the realm. They weren't necessarily direct rivals to the party, but they could have been. And then this is a cool concept of showing them sort of progress over time. Obviously, these guys may need the hero's help as they have contracted Ruidium corruption as part of the adventure. But, you know, how that plays out is really up to you. But I'm curious, what do you think about this rival concept now that we've kind of explored it a little bit further, taking a look at the stat blocks and how they sort of have progressed over time? Do you like this concept? Would you use this in your game? Again, my biggest problem that I feel like a lot of the time is when you introduce some sort of constant present threat to your party. More often than not, if this isn't a TV show, this isn't a movie where like the bad guys can get away to come back and needle the party another day. More often than not, if they're that much of an inconvenience to the party will just kill them. Because, I mean, maybe I deal with more murder hobos than the rest of us, but that's how I see it going. If they're like a really big pain in the ass and the party has gray morality and it doesn't bother them too much to just off someone, that's probably what'll happen, and then your rival system is thrown out the window. So anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I will see you in the next video covering the new monsters in Critical Role Call of the Netherdeep, and then we can put this book to bed.